YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, back in Total War Warhammer 2, and guess what? We're going to jump into some replays. So this one is going to be myself playing as the Skaven against a guy who was a viewer, yeah, this guy was a viewer. I remember him talking to me, I believe, saying that he liked the videos. Do believe that was the case. Anyway, yeah, this Skaven build is the one that I told you so many times that I was scared of meeting, and I decided to bring it. I wasn't really sure what to expect from the High Elves, and if the High Elves go a little dragon heavier, this build can be kind of dangerous. But honestly, this is a pretty scary build for the High Elves. I'm not sure exactly what I would like in order to beat this. So the front line is just Skaven slaves to absorb a charge, and then you've got two plague priest on the what do you call this thing? The plague furnace. And then the Screaming Bell here with the Gracier. In the back line, we've got two Plague Monk Censer Bearers, which are magical attack, anti-armor. We've got a couple of Plague Monks, supported by Rat Ogres, and then there's three Skaven Slave Spears, and then we've got one Doom Wheel. So this army will really put a whole heck of a lot of terror all over an enemy really, really fast. It is kind of gruesome. So that's really its biggest use. So here I'm going to use some Warp Lightning on his Phoenix Guard since they were standing still. I want to do as much damage to these guys as possible because when they're out of the fight, we've pretty much won the fight. So my opponent went for a very elite small army here, and that's exactly what my build is going to excel against. Because when you bring elite infantry like this, the damage is going to be so horrendous immediately off the charge that you really just can't survive it. So here comes the Doom Wheel. It's going to plow through. It's going to keep on doing damage to infantry. It's going to go straight on into these spearmen. Right behind it's going to be my Screaming Bell, and then the Plague Furnaces, and then look, the magic attack right down his line of men who are lined up all nice and pretty. There's going to be breath attacks. We're going to use a Howling Warp Gale to hold his lord in place where he can't do anything. You can see the breath attacks, the Rat Ogres. He finally gets a really nice breath attack right there, and it does tremendous damage, but it hit this Skaven Slave more than it got the Censer Bearer, but it did do some good damage. But again, his lord is stuck in the air where it really can't support. And by the time his lord gets free, look, Spearman dead, Phoenix Guard almost dead, Swordmaster's wavering. By the time his Illyrian Reavers make it around my spears, they're gonna get, they'll get here, but it's gonna be too late. So they'll put a charge in. It's not gonna do much. Archers are dead. His Dragon Princes got delayed. They had to cut their way through a Skaven Slave Spear. I'm more than happy to let that happen. By the time his lord hits the ground, I can now focus everything on it. So although I wouldn't really want to be fighting his lord earlier in this fight, I don't mind it now because I've got Rat Ogres, I've got Screaming Bell, or the Plague Furnaces, Screaming, or whatever it is, something, Bell, Screaming Bell, I think. His Mage of Life is now going to get attacked too, so he's in trouble. I've used Howling Warp Gale again, so it freezes his lord in place. And this build is honestly just very, very brutal. I'm not really sure of a good High Elf build to beat it, honestly. It's pretty good. So, if you guys have ideas, be curious to hear it. I don't know what makes all that noise. I think it's these furnaces and bells. But yeah, his dragon is going to slowly get worked down, and then you can use units like this Doom Wheel for mobility. It can hit regrouping units and keep them out of the fight because of the fear, the terror. It's got a ranged attack. It does a lot of damage to morale. I mean, the people just don't like fighting the Doom Wheel, and I'm going to run it out here, these archers as well. And then again, you can see the dragon forced to fight now because the rest of his army is gone, and it doesn't go well. Some of his units will regroup. He's a little bit slow to pull these Dragon Princes back in. He definitely needs their help, so he's going to pull them over. Phoenix Guard's trying to regroup, but at this point, so much damage has been done to his princess. It's pretty much over. Let's get one last look here at the Doom Wheel running over elf things. Yeah, the Doom Wheel is one nasty piece of work. Very, very useful unit. So, yeah, this army, it says Pyrrhic victory, but it was definitely a clear victory. And I don't mean that with any offense towards my opponent. This build is hard to beat. I wanted to try it out. I hadn't played it in a long time, and I've died to this build a couple of times. It's pretty good. Or similar builds, I should say. Very similar builds. So it's one way that the Skaven can just cause tremendous damage to enemy armies, and I mean tremendous damage. You know, I'm not sure it would be good against something like dinosaurs but, you know, I've never tried it. But against any kind of infantry, elite infantry or infantry heavy build, or even builds that have quite a few ranged units, this one's pretty dangerous because the Doom Wheel and the Rat Ogres and other units can threaten the ranged units. The Rat Ogres can help against lighter cavalry. Skaven Slave Spears are excellent fodder just to waste time against units that they can't beat, but they can tie them up long enough to do some damage. So anyway, hope you all enjoyed that one. Let's move on to the next replay I have for you. This one actually is Lizardmen. This one's going to have some Stegodons for anti-infantry work, Kroq-Gar to do anti-large work, and it's got a Lore of Beast, Skink Priest to, again, so this army is focused around eliminating enemy elite infantry, especially elite infantry that can actually kill dinosaurs like Blackguard, Phoenix Guard, or any other, you know, like Chosen with halberds, that kind of stuff. So Stegodons are really good versus infantry, but obviously they'll die if they get stuck in long-term combat against a really good anti-large, anti-armor unit. So again, Kroq-Gar can kind of fend off enemy lords, and the Stegodons are going to do some work. Now these Stegodons have huge armor, which means that Dark Shards can be particularly effective. And in order to deal with the Dark Shards, or at least give the Dark Shards a hard time, we're going to be deploying some Chameleon Skinks on either flank. These guys are good for a couple things. If the enemy puts cavalry on the flank, these guys are really good at disrupting cavalry and causing damage. And then they can also be used to shoot around the flank and put pressure on units like Dark Shards, either in melee or with their missile attack. And my opponent is using an army that, again, I think both my opponents tonight have picked armies that kind of play into my strategy. He doesn't have a dragon. The dragon would be a pretty serious threat for me because I have no ranged units or no way to bring the dragon down. He instead has a Hydra, and his Malekith is off over here on a cold one. So in this case, you know, again, without the dragon, it makes it more difficult for him to put me in a tough position, I think. He does have the Dark Shards, I like that, but again, you can see his relatively tight formation to protect against charges. It actually works against you when it comes to Doomflock. So if you see an opponent who's using Doomflock, I mean, it may not seem like you're taking a lot of damage, but all of this is bad. It's not damage you want to be taking because it's going to make your guys easier to kill in melee. So Saurus warriors would, you know, in and of themselves get completely wrecked by this infantry line, but with the Stegodons in there dealing 420 damage, and it's anti-infantry and anti-armor, his infantry is in some serious trouble here unless the Dark Shards can do some very quick work. The Hydra has a breath attack that can be used against my large units as well. And again, you can see my Chameleon Skinks getting ready to come work the flank. So the idea is pretty simple. Charge in, and I'm going to focus first on his Swordmaster, or his Hargoneth Executioners. They're not anti-large, so that's where my Stegodons are going to go first. And they're going to cause as much damage to them, get them off the battlefield, so that my Saurus warriors can spend more time fighting against the Blackguard, which is the bigger threat to my dinosaurs. He does use his breath attack on my Stegodon, but I immediately go in and try and shut down his Hydra. That's a pretty cool looking fight going on right here. So my Stegodon's fighting a few infantry. I'm going to take Kroq-Gar back here into the back of these units. Again, the Hargoneth Executioners, we want to hit him with a couple of charges. One of my Stegodons, though, goes crazy and starts chasing his War Hydra, which is going to be interesting. But the other one is able to go into the Executioners. Witch Elves are going to be a key part of defeating this type of Lizardman build, and my opponent doesn't have any. Again, Doomflock is just going to help mop up stuff like Blackguard, which otherwise I won't be great at mopping up. And then once we get enough of his infantry out, even the Blackguard won't be safe from the dinosaurs. So again, focus the Hargoneth Executioners, then you start working the Blackguard. Kroq-Gar is a anti-large beast. He is really good in anti-large work. And then look at the Chameleon Skinks. I actually took him into melee and drove out all the Dark Shards. So I took 2 units of the Chameleon Skinks into melee, and then the other 2 I've gotten into position behind the enemy infantry line. They were poisoning the enemy infantry during the fight. So it helped get rid of the enemy infantry even faster, because poison, again, takes away weapon damage and speed, and I believe leadership. So it puts the enemy in a bad place. Kroq-Gar used his little shotgun ability on the War Hydra. Just want to make sure it stays gone for as long as possible. It is replenishing. And then I'm going to use my Chameleon Skinks to chase his Dark Shards off the map, because again, Dark Shards are one of the biggest threats to dinosaurs. Malekith is trying to do work, but again, he's not on a dragon. So it's going to limit how useful he is against these units. He has fewer hit points when he's not on the dragon, makes him more vulnerable to Kroq-Gar and other units. I mean, he still does pretty good damage, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough. He definitely does not want to be fighting Kroq-Gar right now. I dropped the rocks off of the Skink Priest into that Blackguard, and then I'm going to use the Skink Priest to come over here and put a quick hit on these Executioners to try and keep them from getting back in the fight while I try and clean up the last remaining blobs. So let's watch the Skink Priest here dive in with his Pterodon. Check him out. I think he just threw that guy. Skink Priest is doing some fancy fighting there. But in any case, yeah, the War Hydra did come back, but so much of the infantry is gone for the Dark Elves that they just don't really have enough to stand on here. And Malekith is getting... I mean, he did good, but he got dominated by Kroq-Gar. I haven't even used the healing ability on Kroq-Gar, partly because the Destroyer ability from Malekith kept me from using it. So again, nice use of the ability by my opponent there to keep me from healing, but it just still wasn't enough. So his army plays right into my hands there. So I think you all have seen me successfully use some Dark Elf armies against Lizard builds like this. And I think the difference between my opponent's build and those ones that I've used successfully in the past is that he has too much elite infantry. Now remember, I usually do use the Hargoneth Executioners. The War Hydra won't do you a whole lot of good against the Lizardmen, in my opinion. And Blackguard, while they are very good against dinosaurs, here's the real question. Do you really want your only chance against the dinosaurs to be infantry? And the answer is no, not really. And these guys kill Saurus warriors too slow to be real useful. Now, granted, Hargoneth Executioners are very vulnerable to Stegodons. Very vulnerable. That's why you bring some, you drop the Blackguards, you bring one more Dark Shard, drop the War Hydra, put Malekith on a dragon, or, I mean, you can leave him on his cold one, but you got to bring a little bit of light cavalry to help tie up lizard flanking units like these chameleon skinks, and bring some more infantry again too to help tie up stuff like the chameleon skinks. And then your Dark Shards have to immediately get after Stegodons, and then they can be protected by the light cavalry, Malekith, and Witch Elves. The Witch Elves are too dangerous. You can't just charge Kroq-Gar Stegodons to go get the Dark Shards, because the Witch Elves will drive you crazy, and then you're dead. Because if your units rampage, your whole army is going to fall apart. You can't do it. So that's what makes the Dark Elves, in my opinion, dangerous versus the Lizardmen. And in this case, without the Witch Elves and stuff, there was just no real way for them to control the Dino units from the Lizardmen. So not a bad faction pick, just not exactly the right army, in my opinion, to go up against that. But hope you all enjoyed this. It's been a while since I'd showed some replays, so I wanted to get you all some replays. I love making the content for you. Can't wait to be back with more. I want to say thanks to MSI for sponsoring the channel, and thank you to you all for being here, and like I said, giving me the opportunity to make this for you. Tell me what you think in the comments. HeirofCarthage, signing out for now.